Hello, I'm David from Barclays.
He's lying.
I'm currently in the process of upgrading your account.
No, he isn't.
So I just need your full password.
No, he doesn't. It's a scam.
Once I've got that, I can send you a link to access the account.
That's also a scam. Every year, millions are lost to fraud. At Barclays, we'll never ask for your full password or PIN, so never give it out.
Thanks for your time.
At least that's true.
Independent Republic of Mike Graham on Talk Radio.
Now, time to say a very happy new year to Mr. Peter Hitchens. Peter, very good, happy new year to you. How are you?
I don't do the happy new years, Mike. I refuse to acknowledge it.
Excellent.
Happy Christmas. There's still a few days of it left.
All right. Well, this is the best way for you to welcome yourself back to the world of the Independent Republic, because I was beginning to think that I'd sort of changed your curmudgeonly ways. So I'm very pleased to see that I haven't done that. We were reminded over the Christmas period, somebody did a kind of best of the Independent Republic show, and one of the highlights was you sitting in a pub refusing to have a drink on the grounds that you would only have one if you could walk up to the bar and get it yourself.
That's right. That day did eventually come.
It did.
It wasn't recorded for posterity, but it did come, and has come several times since, actually.
Yes, it has. I mean, but the cup has literally been dashed from our lips several times as well, right?
Exactly. Yes, but who knows how long it will be before it's dashed again?
Yes.
You can't tell when the madness will take hold. Looking across the channel at most of the continental countries, they're still possessed by complete hysteria. You can't even go out in the street without having to wear a face covering.
Yes. Well, I just heard from Simon Calder from The Independent on the travel front that if you get on the train, I think it was down to Marseille or Lyon, you're now no longer allowed to eat or drink on the train.
Well, that would be it, because of course, that was the last remaining excuse. And if you did, as I advise people to do on any such train journey, and buy a large 5-course picnic, you could pretty much keep it going for the whole journey. But they spotted that loophole, and lo, it has gone. So everybody has to sit muzzled for the whole journey now. It's extraordinary how powerful the masking lobby remains, well beyond any true research justification for it. And I still think that it is a symbol of compliance, which some people long to see everybody submit to.
Yes. Well, as we can see from the insistence that schools should now reimpose them in classrooms, which seems to me to be utterly unnecessary, entirely dangerous for kids' mental health, and just without any evidence backing it whatsoever.
Well, I wouldn't go quite that. I doubt very much whether it offers all that much danger. It's just it must make the whole business of being in class a lot more miserable than it needs to be. And there is evidence of some benefits from some forms of mask, but it as I've always said, it isn't at the level which could possibly justify compulsion. If people want to wear them, then as far as I'm concerned, let them do so. But it's the compulsion which gets my goat. A country in which people are told what to wear, especially over their faces, is a country which has lost its way as far as liberty is concerned. You look at all this stuff, it's immensely confusing, and would probably take you a week to look at it all, but it really, there is nothing there which says to me that the compulsion by law with the threat of fines and all the rest of it is justified. And I still hold that position.
But that's the case, isn't it? I mean, there is literally no evidence that's compelling, certainly. But also, my argument would always be, if, and as we have been in all sorts of parts of the world, wearing masks for this length of time, why are we suddenly now in a situation where there are more coronavirus infections than ever?
Well, all trumping arguments of that kind are immediately answered by the hysterics by saying, well, how do you know? It wouldn't have been much worse if people hadn't been wearing masks. There is no answer to that. It all goes back to the original sort of Garden of Eden of the COVID hysteria, when we did not lock down soon enough.
Yes.
Of Adam and Eve eating the tree of the fruit of knowledge. That was the moment at which it all went wrong. We didn't lock down soon enough and hard enough. And that is the answer to everything. And don't imagine for a moment you will ever get around this by reason. It is a faith. And it's very strong faith in a particular new kind of way of life. And you said earlier on, we should think about how it was before, and I often do, but I don't actually think we're going to get back to it any more than we'll ever get back to the days before September the 11th, 2001, when we sacrificed a huge amount of small but important liberties in return for an illusory security. And once you do that, you never get it back, because nobody in authority will ever dare take the risk.
No, and that is the difficulty, isn't it? You wrote this weekend about, well, you sort of reminded everyone about your Christmas in the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, and how that had all gone, and sort of looked ahead to where we are going, because we are heading into a very interesting period, it seems to me, where COVID will start to sort of disappear off, I think, into slightly the far distance, and we'll suddenly be greeted with massive inflation, which you, I have to say, predicted, and a huge rise in energy costs.
Well, yes, these things were completely predictable, and what I do think the COVID frenzy has done, amongst many other things, is it's strengthened the general faith in authority and the general willingness to set aside the great protecting documents of bills of rights, which had previously protected us against authoritarian government, and therefore has strengthened the power of the Green lobby, which wants us to actually abandon the free societies which we used to have in favour of idealistic societies devoted to the alleged saving of the planet, in which all opposition is heresy, and people are not just wrong but bad who oppose it, and in which governments are licensed to take the most extraordinary steps to combat the alleged terror of man-made global warming. And this is what we now are entering, and what I was trying to point out about Moscow. Moscow, when I was there, was still just the world capital of communism, and the world capital of an idea which had proved itself by then to be totally stupid, but which, you have to remember, became popular and powerful because it promised a better world. And there were the great contradictions. It was supposed to be in favour of equality. The only decent hospital in the entire city was reserved for members of the Communist Party Central Committee, a few dozen people, and hidden behind a 15-foot wall so you couldn't even see it. If you wanted decent medical treatment in Moscow, the only thing to do was to do what we would have done had it happened, and drive as fast as we could to the airport and get on a plane to Helsinki. The place was supposed to be the home of plenty as well. Communism was supposed to produce plenty for all. In fact, the shops were largely empty, and unless you had means of finding the stuff. The joke, the woman goes into the shop and says, do you have any fish? And the assistant replies, no, we don't have any meat. The shop that doesn't have any fish is on the other side of the road over there. That was a joke which worked because it was largely true.
Yes.
You went into those shops and there was nothing there. The only way to obtain stuff was on the black market. The whole thing didn't work. It became a contradiction itself, and had become so ludicrous that eventually it just collapsed in a cloud of rust in 1991. Now, I believe that the Green ideology has similar contradictions and follies within it, which will lead it to collapse. And we can see them already, but other people seem to be determined to go through the whole 75-year process of making a colossal fools of ourselves before they realize this. But here we have it. It's right in front of us now. This year, you will find your fuel bills will go up enormously. Everybody will. It will be a hard fact which we all face along with the inflation. And this will be directly because of the stupid green dogma which possessed the government to destroy very large numbers of coal-fired power stations, to substitute for them gas, which actually is not green, and then to actually prevent the extraction of gas from some fields of this country, so that limited our own supplies of it and made us dependent on foreign gas supplies, and neglect the renewal of nuclear power stations. So we now face this. These decisions were all dogmatic. It's even worse in Germany,
right?
Where at the new year they actually closed some perfectly functioning nuclear power stations for purely dogmatic reasons, making themselves therefore much more dependent upon Russian gas. Now, why would anybody do that?
Well, isn't it
Unless they were off
interesting
their heads?
that the conversation turns full circle, because here we now have the former Soviet Union, Russia, operating, as some would describe it, as a bit of a sort of gangster rogue state, but basically controlling European power supplies, European energy supplies, and being able to turn it on and off at will.
Well, yes. So I think it has to be said that the weapon as such has not really been used, and Russia has many problems, and it is indeed a terrifying autocracy, and not to be praised. But the problem is that we are at the mercy of this, and if Russia gets a regime which is the sort that we claim that it has, which you could easily do. People may think they don't like Vladimir Putin now, but I shudder to think who will succeed him. If it gets the sort of regime that we think that it has, and in reality, then that could be the case. They really could choke off the main energy supplies to large parts of Western Europe, and the consequences of that would be extraordinarily bad.
Absolutely right. And so, I mean, will there be, do you think, some form of revolt? Because I was asking Tom Hunt this morning, who's one of the backbenchers, who is more conservative, certainly, than the government is at the moment.
Not difficult.
Not difficult at all. John Redwood was talking as well to Julia this morning about how, he's going to fight against the Rishi Sunak tax rise in April. He wants to see fracking being explored more. We have plenty of energy in this country if we were only, if we had the political will to explore it and actually find it. But I don't see Boris. I've sort of given him a pass over New Year for not making it worse for people and keeping restrictions away. But he's still not out of the woods as far as being Prime Minister is concerned, is he?
No. We in my newspaper, the Mail on Sunday, had a very interesting poll on Sunday, which showed that his support is definitely diminished, particularly in the so-called red wall seats, which he needs very badly to hold the next election. But that, of course, opinion polls do that. They give you an idea of what people think now. If a general election came, then these figures always narrow, but he is in a certain amount of trouble. But I'm always reminded of the great watchword of the Clinton campaign back in the 1990s, whenever they were asked about one subject or another. They said, it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
What decides how people vote is how they're living. If they suddenly find that they're more heavily taxed, they can't afford to live as they used to. If prices have gone up and they can't afford to live as they used to, then they get angry, and they take that out by voting for the opposition.
Yeah.
And this is the great danger which he faces if he messes up the economy. If people find that their taxes are intolerably high, inflation is unbearably high, and they can't pay their fuel bills, then they will take it out on the incumbent government by voting for the other lot, and that will finish him, whatever he does. And I think that might conceivably influence him, because whatever else he may or may not be, he's not stupid.
No. And he also likes to be popular.
He and his men, he needs to be popular to keep his job. And so whether he wants to be popular or not personally, he needs to get those votes. And I think the fact that there is now substantial economic pressure building up on Middle Britain must have an impact on his policies if he's got any sense at all. You can only hope for that, but whether it'll be a full recalibrating of the whole green lunacy, which would be much to be desired, or whether it'll just be a few tinkerings to lessen the effect of it, I don't know. But we certainly need to examine this seriously and also to permit dissent and not treat it as heresy and not treat disagreement as a wicked act on this matter. Otherwise, we're finished. But
also, again, much of what he's done has been smoke and mirrors. I mean, I found out just purely by chance that, in fact, the electric car subsidy has actually been reduced, despite what they said at COP26, despite what they said about everybody supposedly wanting to drive an electric car in the future. They've made it less cheap to get one.
They reduced it because more people were taking it up. They found that they priced it wrong. They priced it so cheap that lots of people were doing it. Of course, there is a big problem with electric cars, which everybody in the business understands, but they keep quiet about. If millions of people really did take up using electric cars, they'd all have to be charged from somewhere. And our power generation system simply isn't up to doing it. If every single car in this country went electric, the power stations would crash because they simply could not produce enough electricity to do it. You're basically switching a huge area of power consumption away from petroleum products into directly generated power from power stations. And we simply haven't got the capacity to do it.
No, we don't. Stay with us for a moment, because I want to talk to you about the Blair creature, as you refer to him, because you said something very interesting before Christmas about him. And now, fair enough, he's now Sir Tony Blair. I'm sure Peter will have plenty to say about that. We're talking to Peter Hitchens, Man on Sunday columnist. We'll take more of your calls coming up very shortly as well. The Home of Common Sense is back. This is Talk Radio.
Talk Radio.
They can take away your...
Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham right here on Talk Radio. Much for us to discuss, much for us to look forward to. Parliament back apparently on Wednesday, so we've got Prime Minister's questions, presumably, between Sir Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson. Of course, we now are talking to Peter Hitchens from the Mail on Sunday. He wrote about many things at the weekend, but I'm sure that he will have plenty to say when I ask him this question. Who on earth thought it was a good idea to give a knighthood to Sir Tony Blair? Peter?
Well, I've reached a stage some time ago where I thought that knighthoods and indeed peerages are things which a sensible person really ought to avoid. And I'm not going to name names, but quite a lot of people I've known since I first came to Fleet Street have now become peers of the realm.
Yeah.
And a number of them become knights. And one also looks around at some of the show business knighthoods that are awarded, and you think, well, wouldn't you be better off not being like them? So I don't necessarily take it as a compliment. Who really cared about this award? The fascinating thing about Sir Anthony Blair's garter is that it came directly from Her Majesty the Queen, thus, I think, destroying the last remaining illusions of conservative monarchists, such as I am, that the Queen herself had seen through Blair and had decided not to make this award to him at all, which she could easily have done. And it's not a government thing.
But has she ever done that? Has she ever refused to knight someone?
Well, the delay to his garter has been very long, and it's been much remarked upon that so long after his time in office, he still hadn't got it. Normally, you wouldn't wait anything like that long. So people have speculated that there was some needle between Buckingham Palace and Blair, which had led to it. Well, if there is, it's over now. That seems to be the most interesting part of it. It doesn't make him any. It doesn't make him any safer. It doesn't make him any nicer. It doesn't make him any prettier. It doesn't make him any better. So, and I personally don't envy him being a Knight of the Garter, nor should any sensible people. These honours seem to me to have got completely out of hand. The only ones that I ever take seriously are those awarded for actual acts of valour. They count. The rest of it is often Buggins' turn, jobs worth stuff, which is really of no consequence.
No, sure.
But
it kind of does it not kind of give him a certain level of respect, which other people in other countries will look upon as an improvement of his status, if you like. You know, oh, he's a knight of the realm.
It will raise his price on the foreign markets beyond doubt. I think he already makes a substantial living giving speeches to conventions of disinfectant manufacturers and people like that.
Yeah.
I know exactly what it is that he does. I remember once, many years ago, going to a horrible thing. It's the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. I bought a ticket to a Margaret Thatcher appearance.
Yes.
It was very embarrassing. It began with sort of tootling rendition of God Save the Queen, and then on she came. And she wasn't at the height of her powers by then, but she made a fatuous speech of a sort of vaguely patriotic nature. And everybody in the vast auditorium gave a standing ovation and whooped and shit. They haven't particularly liked it, but what they've basically done, they've gone to see this major historical curiosity, which she was.
Yeah.
I don't think Blair is. I think he wouldn't really go a very long distance to see him, whatever else.
But it may increase his value to somebody like J.P. Morgan, for whom he's paid for quite a long time.
As I say, I speculated a couple of weeks ago on the possibility that he might actually be hoping for a comeback, and indeed that the Labour Party might eventually reach for him, because I can't see any of their current generation of leaders doing it for them. And maybe this will help him in that. I wouldn't ever rule that possibility out. My late brother, and this is a completely different example, but when he worked on the old Weekend World, they did some pilot programs back in the very early years, and they got in old Sir Oswald Mosley to interview him. And just before it started, Mosley, who was a sort of trembling heap of jelly by that stage, grey hair and twitching and a physical ruin, said to the interviewer, "Is there any chance at all this will ever be shown?" And they said, "Well, yes." They were lying, but they said, "Yes, there is." And immediately he straightened up. His dewlaps solidified. His shoulders were braced. He looked about 10 years younger.
Wow.
He still hoped, after all that time, that somehow or other he might yet get into power.
Yeah.
And I don't think it ever leaves any of them as long as they're alive. I don't think Blair gave up Downing Street willingly, and I think if someone ever offered him the chance to go back, he'd take it. So I would take this as a rather worrying sign that idea is still burning in his breast.
Oh, I'm sure, because they all have it. No, I mean, they all have it, don't they? When you've watched, as I have, many prime ministers being dragged out of Downing Street, unwillingly, they don't ever want to leave that job, because, and I fear the same for Boris Johnson, who somehow thinks that he should leave, like they all do, some kind of legacy behind, which can only be behind this ridiculous green agenda of his, which is obviously being fed to him by Mrs. Johnson and various Zach Goldsmith types around him. Yeah, I mean, he wants to be remembered as this great prime minister. They all do, and very few of them are.
Well, what is most of the pursuit of office about, apart from vanity? So, what would you expect?
Yeah.
If you wanted a bladder of vanity on a tremendous Olympic international scale, then of course Blair is the place to look. So I don't know. I don't rule out that I'm part of that. He still keeps himself very trim, doesn't he?
Oh, he does, and he certainly got himself involved. He got himself very much involved in the sort of the booster argument, didn't he? Because he did an interview with Times Radio just before Christmas, in which he said anyone who doesn't get vaccinated is an idiot. You know,
he keeps intervening in what he doubtless regards as a statesman-like way. Because if he comes back, the whole of the rest of the hedge come back as well.
Oh yeah.
Paul returns, and Peter Mandelson and all the rest of them come marching back. Imagine the joy that will fill the nation when that lot return. I say, don't rule it out. Look at Keir Starmer, Sir Keir Starmer, as we should say. After all, they're now both knights. And look at these two knights, and say which of them is more likely to lead the Labour Party.
Yes.
And the Labour Party will eventually cotton on to this fact, I think.
Yes.
It was what I was surprised by when I made some vague criticisms of him for being a warmonger and a useless person over the weekend, was how many new Labour supporters wrote in with these long lists of what they regard as his great achievements. He is still admired.
Oh yeah.
By a surprising number of people.
Oh, very much so. But which only goes to serve to see how many ways the Labour Party is now split. You know, you've got the ex-Corbynites who hate Keir Starmer and hate Blair even more. You've got the Blairites who are not sure about Starmer and certainly hate Corbyn. And you've got Starmer who doesn't know which way to turn. Under those circumstances, you can't really see anything changing.
Well, I'd say except unless some really significant game changer appears. And I say I fear this may be it. And remember that I said it. Mock me if I turn out to be wrong.
No, listen. There hasn't been much mocking. I have to say, there hasn't been much mocking. There hasn't been much mocking of the Hitchens predictions, I have to say. I mean, you never get into Sage with your level of accuracy, I'm afraid. You're far too good at it.
Well, there's always a first time.
Well, good to see you, Peter. We'll be talking, I'm sure, some more over the course of this year. Let's hope, even with his inbuilt pessimism, that we will have a better outcome this year than we had last year. 2022, surely to God, has to be better than 2021. Let's get some news headlines.
Honest talk, fighting talk.